Welcome to Throwing Shade and Clay.
We're your hosts, Karen and Louise, slinging history, politics, and paint in equal measure.
Each episode, we take one fascinating moment from history
and see how it still shapes the world we're living in today.
While we're at it, we'll be painting pottery inspired by the theme, because nothing says political discourse like a perfectly glazed mug.
So grab your brushes, your hot takes, and your sense of humor, and let's throw some shade and some clay.
This episode may include adult language and disturbing themes like war, political liaisons, and the cluster we call the American government. Please exercise caution when listening with children under 13. Hi.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Louise.
How's it going?
It's great. It's our first podcast, and I'm a little nervous, but it's going to be amazing.
The good news is no one can see us yet, so that's positive.
Yes, always a positive in my book. Okay, so first things first. What is this?
What is this?
So, Shade and Clay is a funny, witty, satirical, historical, well-researched, thank you, Louise, and artistically inclined podcast designed to make you think about past events, modern society, and how art binds it all together. So we'll talk about historical events, societal shifts, moments in time that influenced, for better or worse, the world we live in today. Projects we make and share with you will be a mix of hand-built clay, poured ceramics, canvas, and any other knickknack worth creating. We hope to inspire you to think deeply about modern politics and the events that led us here. And if you don't want to do that, just make some art and drown in the anime with us.
It means ennui, but more fancy.
Okay. Well,
I know I wanted to use
something new today.
Ennui, but I felt like that was too on the nose for our French first episode, so I skipped it and went with anime. I'm not sure that I'm saying it correctly either, so don't feel bad about it.
Okay, cool.
We're going to learn. Everyone can correct us in the comments later. It's fine. So that is what our podcast is. Our format is going to be a little interesting. So we're going to introduce our topic at the top of the pod, talk about what we're discussing and why we chose the topic. Then we're going to introduce the project because we will be doing an art project during the pod that you can watch on YouTube later. And then we're going to talk about why we chose the project that we chose for the topic and where they can find the project guide. Then we'll do some fun facts. That's where you come in because I'm not fun.
That is not true. She's very fun. However, I am also a fount of useless information, and that is the part that I can contribute to the podcast.
I'm so excited. Then we're going to relate it back to modern society and talk about how this topic influences us today. How can we use what we've learned to shape our worldview? And if there's a problem, can we fix it? Then we'll wrap up on the project and the subject matter. And we'll talk about if we're selling our pieces, which we haven't yet decided. So maybe we'll do a poll in our first Insta and see if people want to buy the stuff that we make or what we're going to do with it from there.
And then obviously we can't pull you on Instagram if you don't know how to find us. So you can check us on Instagram at Throwing Shade and Clay. And also our YouTube, which hopefully you've already discovered because that's how you got here.
All right, so let's dive in. This week's episode, it's our first episode ever, and we picked a very light, very breezy, very fun topic.
Absolutely.
Today we're going to talk about the Women's March on Versailles, which if you are not familiar with history, occurred on October 5th of 1789. And I don't know that I knew the year and day either.
I don't think so. I think, we're bad enough at knowing our own American history. It's really tough to remember dates for other countries and, important dates that they had, at least the year.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I think I thought that the French Revolution was before the American Revolution. I feel like I thought that the French were ahead of us on something because they usually are.
Especially because they helped us in the American Revolution. So you would think that they had already had their own stuff figured out by then.
Well, I think that their help was more politically driven because they wanted America to be an ally. But honestly, I didn't research that part of it because it was enough getting into the Women's March.
When it comes to actual historical facts, friends, let's definitely go with Louise's assumptions and thoughts because as much as I love history, I retain nothing.
Oh, and something we didn't do in our introduction was explain why anyone should want to listen to us.
Oh, right.
So let's
might be important.
Rewind. My name's Louise. I own a pottery studio in Indiana, but more importantly, maybe I have a human services degree that I don't use from the University of Baltimore. So I spent way too many years, probably 6, getting my degree, my bachelor's degree. And the goal was to use it at a nonprofit to win them grant money or something lofty like that. And instead I'm using it to start a cult. And this is our first foray into starting a cult.
Absolutely. So would this be the first instance of two female co-cult leaders?
I think
feel like it
so.
would be.
Honestly, I think so. I think it's probably the first instance of two cult leaders too, because usually cult leaders are too egomaniacal
Right.
to do things together.
Well, and what's really interesting and it's going to be super fun trying to figure out how to work this cult is that Louise and I are both people pleasers.
Cult is rough.
Be a little tough, but I feel like we're going to figure it out because we are determined to do this. And anyway, so my name's Karen. I also have actually 2 bachelor's degrees that I don't use. I attended a private university in central Indiana. And my degrees are in criminology and French, which don't go together at all. I used to be fluent in French, definitely not anymore, especially because the last like 3-4 semesters of a language degree, you're reading 16th century literature in old French, and you've already felt like you had to learn a foreign language, which you did, but then you have to relearn the foreign language. It's like learning old English when you already know English. So anyway, not using either one of those. I became friends with Louise because I was a customer at her pottery shop and I am obsessed with it. And so I said, hey, you should hire me part-time because I have a stupid corporate job that I can't make myself quit because I like money. And
don't we all? That's the rough part.
right. So it kind of started out slow. I just worked a couple hours a week and now here we are. We're besties and we're making a freaking podcast, which is cool and scary and awesome.
It is awesome. And I'm very proud of you. You're wearing your name tag today. So you've got
Yes.
Manager of Squirrels on your name tag. Mine is lost in the annals of my purse, but mine says Noah of all things because I'm a freaking weirdo who knows everything.
So it says pot dealer.
It does also say pot dealer because I was very sure that I wanted that on there. And then I realized I do a lot of field trips with kids. So maybe I should have 2.
Okay, so I guess I need to make you another one.
I think I just need one that says Noah of all things and one that's like, they just need to be separate, but that's my own fault. But if I can't put on one, I'm not going to remember to put on the other one. So
Right.
let's not
So maybe,
get into that.
maybe I should. All right, fine.
So let's dive back in. So we're doing the Women's March on Versailles, which means that our project today, we are painting in the style of China Sui. China Sui actually means in the style of China. So in the 1600s and the 1700s, Far East type of culture was just entering the zeitgeist in Europe. So they had just learned about Asia really through trade routes and different avenues. And so they were stealing every part of their culture that they liked and Europeanifying it, which is definitely a word.
You know, it's not like we don't still do those things today. Like, you know, the fortune cookie is totally Chinese, except it was invented in America.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they go back and forth. So
Right.
That's exactly true. So when we think about China Sui, it's an art design based on Chinese art. So the form and format is kind of loose. It can be in the traditional Chinese style where we've got red, black, gold playing part of it. In this case, I'm doing mine in the traditional blue and white pottery style that we see in French art. And then you're using orange just to be super seasonal and cute.
And because I like to break the rules.
And the idea of China Sui was that the art itself kind of matched in with the Rococo design that was already popular in France. It was kind of ostentatious, over the top, and lots of detail. Mine will have less detail because I'm the world's laziest painter, but we're going to go for the same aesthetic. So we're doing florals, seasonal depictions of things that we enjoy this time of life, and etc. According to Voltaire, in his Art de la Chine, the fact remains that 4,000 years ago, when we did not know how to read, they, the Chinese, knew everything essentially useful of which we boast today. So that gives you a little idea of how the French felt at that time about the Chinese. And then, of course, Chinese culture, Japanese culture, Korea didn't exist then, but Korean culture, they all just became this panegyric of Oriental culture to the Europeans. So if there's mistakes in our art or how we're talking about it today, you can blame the French in the 1700s. We don't really need to blame us. Like,
Well, and people
they just did what they wanted.
seem to like to blame the French for a lot anyway.
And it's like,
I mean, whatever. Fine. We're just
and then the reason that the blue and white took on so popularly in France was that they did have a couple of Jesuit priests that spied on the Chinese to learn their style of pottery and to learn how to do it, but they really weren't great spies. So they brought back, I know, right? They brought back all these styles and ideas, but what they didn't bring back was the actual formularies for the glaze. So the best thing that the French had that lasted at the higher temperatures was cobalt, and cobalt, of course, is blue. So a lot of their Chine Sui is the blue and white because the cobalt would last at the higher fire temperatures. Because they did figure out how to make porcelain and how to vitrify it, but they couldn't figure out how to use the high viscosity colors that the Chinese had figured out already.
that seems to track. I mean, it's a partially formed plan. It sounds good in theory, but then when you apply it in practice, you missed a couple steps.
Just a couple.
So it's fine.
All right, and then you guys can find the project guide for this at kilncreations.net/blog. And this will be a loose project guide based on exactly how Karen and I did our projects today. So you can apply it in any kind of way that you'd like. If you need help finding a paint your own pottery studio near you, you can go to paintyourownpottery.com and use the studio tracker to find one close to you, or you can just stalk us and come visit us and we'll walk you through it step by step.
Absolutely.
So we're getting into the info dump now, the who, what, where, when, and later the why of the Women's March on Versailles. And while we're doing that, we're going to attempt to paint at the same time. And as I'm doing this, this is terrifying. So let's go ahead and get started. I have to kind of lead you through this lesson since this is the lesson that I created and you didn't create. I'm not going to use a marker.
Oh,
I know. So you can use a marker to draw out your designs ahead of time, or you can just do it freehand. And Karen's going to use a marker today to pre-draw her design. We use markers in our studio rather than pencils because they don't leave drag marks on the pottery as pencils can sometimes do, especially if your lead is not super pure. But she's just using a plain old washable marker. Your studio may use something different. So go ahead and start drawing your design. And since I'm going to freehand mine, I'm going to set up my paint first. We're going to use paint different, what do you call that? Titrations. So we're going to water down our first coat, then add more paint, then add more paint, then use the paint straight out of the jar. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we've got like layers of color. All right. So I've got my paint here on my paint palette. Hopefully, yeah, you guys can see all of it. That's awesome. And I am using Mako's, what color is this? Caribbean blue. And I'm going to dilute it about 75%. So it's going to be super watery and super light. And then Karen is starting out with Mako's orange appeal. And she's going to do the same thing after she's drawn all of her little designs. All right, let's get into it. So October 5th, 1789, we're on the heels of the July 14th storming of the Bastille. So Bastille Day, every year the French celebrate that. Fun fact, about every 4 days.
I was supposed to do fun fact.
You are, I'm sorry.
But I don't know this fun fact, so please continue.
This is about the French storming their own castle and winning their own freedom back from their own monarch. However, every 4 days around the globe, just about, a country celebrates its freedom from England, which is an interesting thing. So at the same time that the American Revolution has started to dwindle and America started to establish themselves as a country, the French are just getting going to topple Louis. We have the July 14th storming of the Bastille in 1789, and the king retaliates, squashing the revolution. In August, on the 4th, the parliamentary men get together and they form the August Decrees. Article 1, and we're just going to run through all these articles. A lot of the places that I was reading about this were like, oh, we just picked 4 of the most exciting ones. But once I read them all, they were all very interesting. So the articles, just like our
Bill of Rights.
Thank you. Our Bill of Rights and really our Constitution.
Right.
So they made amendments later, but this is like the framing of their Constitution. So Article 1 abolishes feudalism, which, to be honest, I didn't know was still a thing in 1789 France, but I guess I should have. That was kind of their whole beginning complaint, was that they didn't want to have to keep paying tithes and not owning their own land.
Fair.
And then Article 2, this one perplexed me, and that's why I was like, we're going through all of these. Article 2 was locking up the pigeons. Apparently,
Was there a pigeon like epidemic? What happened with these pigeons?
apparently the king had a set or a housing of pigeons that were the royal birds. And these birds were allowed to, they were let out at certain times and they were ruining crops. And the king was like, who cares? And it is so a part of French culture in the 1600s that we see that come up in their fairy tales. So there's a very famous fairy tale that, of course, I can't remember the name of, but I just listened to on Tales by Vanessa, which is so great. And she talks about a woman who is trying to escape someone who is trying to attack her, and she enchants him, and he happens to be the pigeon keeper, and his enchantment is to open and close the pigeon door at like nonstop until he's exhausted. Anyways,
It was like a weird take on Sisyphus.
yeah, yes, yeah. It's a French take on Sisyphus. Very good. Okay, yeah, I knew that story.
Random knowledge.
I
I'm
knew that
telling you,
story
people.
felt like we'd already heard it 10 times. Okay. So Article 3 is abolish exclusive hunting rights. That is a big part of the American Revolution as well. The king held all the land, which meant the king was the only one who could hunt on it unless he gave you a hunting license, which meant that if you're a poor farmer, you can't even kill the deer, the rabbit, the squirrels that you find on your land without permission. So you can't even feed yourself or your family, which is just absolutely bonkers. But we see this again and again in lots of societies at this point in time, that the king holds absolute power and the land is his to do what he wishes with. Article 4 abolishes the justices without compensation. So it kind of suspends the judgments and the judges' rule. This was, again, one of the complaints in the American Revolution, where judges were like all powerful, they could do whatever they wanted, and they also could fine and penalize people basically just for being poor. So this says, we're not going to do that. They don't need to be compensated right now. We're going to figure this out and then revisit this topic later. Article 5 abolishes tithes, which of course was part of the feudal system. If you lived on, let's say, a prince's land and you were just this poor feudal farmer, the prince at any point in time could come to you and say, I need more taxes. And so they were just being taxed out of every
penny. I mean,
Yeah.
They don't own their land. They don't. Plus, a lot of these people, were they Catholic around this time? So you've got your government tithing you. You've got your religion tithing you. I mean, what's left?
Yeah, and that comes up later as well. So in Article 5, they're abolishing the tithes to the church and telling the church to be more self-sufficient, which we're seeing now. I mean, we're seeing people complain now about churches not being taxed when they're speaking about politics from their pulpits. Interesting tie-in there.
Mm-hmm.
So Article 6 included a chance for them to buy back their loans. So if, as a small rural farmer, you needed a loan for something, your feudal lord would own that loan. If he sold your loan to someone else, they could charge you whatever they wanted. They could say that your loan was reinstated at the original value, which kind of sounds like the mortgage market today. It also kind of sounds like student loan debt today, if I'm being completely transparent. So number 7 in the articles were judicial and municipal fees were abolished. We see this in cultures over and over again, that it's really only a tax if you're poor. If you're rich, it doesn't matter because you just pay the fine and move on with your life. But at this point in time, the people assessing the fines were the nobility. So they weren't getting assessed any fines themselves. And they're just taking everything from the lower orders of society.
What does this sound like, people?
So number 8 in the August decrees is abolishing payments to priests. Priests could exact any kind of tithe or payment within their space that they wanted. And you're right, whether you are Catholic or not. I mean, at this point, everyone is Catholic, but let's say somewhere in your heart, you didn't believe the teachings of Catholic anymore. You didn't have a choice. Your priest was your judicial ruler and could exact any kind of tithe or tax on you that they wanted. Number 9 in the August decree was equal taxes on all citizens. So at this point in time, the only people who pay taxes are the lower orders. So the big important princes and priests, they don't pay any taxes at all. Any. So all of these wars that the king wants to get involved in, all of the tithing that they're executing, none of it applies to the nobility, which is just so poignant. So number 10, they assert the equality of all men. It's a little low on the list. It's another reason why I wanted to go through the whole list. I feel like that's important.
I mean,
So we're going to include that one.
maybe even like number 2, if we're abolishing feudalism with Article 1, then let's let everyone be equal.
Yeah. So at this point in time, not everyone can vote, not everyone can be part of parliament, and not everyone can work anywhere, which is why the 11th decree in the August decree is that anyone can hold any job regardless of their birth or title. I also didn't realize that, I mean, I knew that in feudal systems, if your parents were farmers, you were a farmer. Right. But I did not know that if your parents were a farmer, the only thing you could be was a farmer. There really was no upward mobility or choices or anything. So then you've got this system where, of course, you're all Catholic. So you have to have as many babies as you can, which even then in the 1700s, I'm not sure the contraception was a thing, but, delayed pregnancy or things like that were not allowed. You had to have as many children as you could. You can't commit suicide because you're Catholic. Right. So you have to live through this interesting time period, no matter what. And you're creating all these babies. So the lower classes grow and grow and grow and grow and can't feed themselves. And the upper classes stay in power and stay smaller sized families that are more mobile, that have more tithes. So it's just creating this huge pyramid with this giant base and only 3 people at the tippy top. Interesting, right? I thought so.
Interesting in an awful way.
In an awful way. That was August 4th. In September, on the 23rd, the king sends the Flanders Regiment to Versailles as an attempt to quell another violent display like the one at Bastille. King Louis, in his infinite wisdom, on the 1st of October, prepares a banquet for the incoming troops. This is a banquet that he's making for troops while the entire city is completely starving. Okay, they have no bread, they have no meat, they have no nothing. Starving. Now, here's where we get the infamous and fake Marie Antoinette quote, "Let them eat brioche." The quote is, "Let them eat brioche." I don't know why I get so mad about this, as it is a fake quote to begin with. It just incites me that people say, "Let them eat cake." Anyways.
Well, okay. So let's talk about this for a second. That is one of the main things that if anyone knows one thing about Marie Antoinette, they're going to think that, right? And right now, over the last, I don't know, decade or so, there's been such a focus on fake news. And in the very minimal reading that I did to prepare for this podcast, one of the things that I saw was that so many things about Marie Antoinette were garbage.
Like, absolutely garbage.
All the stuff that people thought about her, I mean, yeah, she was out of touch, but what royal isn't out of touch, right? So there's so many things that she got blamed for, but she was essentially just a scapegoat. Like,
yes, this is a literal child brought from another world to the French, who are very strict, very weird to her, foreign. They put her in a glass cage and tell her good luck. And then, yes, use her as a scapegoat for jewelry and brioche. Mm-hmm. Very strange. We get into October 4th, and several women start giving speeches encouraging other women to march on Versailles. This happens in the fish markets, in the bread markets, where they are just incensed. And literally, it starts with one woman banging a drum. I think that's such a powerful idea that one woman started this whole thing and changed history, but what do I think? From worldhistory.org, early on the morning of the 5th of October, a young woman marched through the streets of eastern Paris beating a drum. Gradually, she was joined by other poissadres from various districts, so other fishwomen, some of them carrying makeshift weapons like cudgets and knives. And as the procession makes its way to the Hotel de Ville, Paris City's hall, they took control of the Church de St. Margaret. ringing the bells to call their fellow Parisians to action. By the time they reached the hotel, there were as many as 7,000 of them chanting, "When will we have bread?" Troops aligned with the crowd in the hopes of quelling the violence, allowing the women to ransack the hotel, take munitions, all while calling for backup from Lafayette. Yes, that Lafayette. Do you know Lafayette's real name?
No.
Did you ever think that his name wasn't just like Pierre de Lafayette or something?
Right.
It never occurred to me that Lafayette was his title, not his name. So I thought this was like the best part of the learning that I did.
Oh.
Name. It's Marie Joseph Paul Yves Roche Gilbert du Montier de Lafayette.
Good gracious.
Because Lafayette, he's the Marquis de Lafayette.
Right.
That's literally his title, just like being like a lawyer. So this whole time I was like, he's lawyer. No, he's got a whole name. Fascinating.
Oh yeah, I'm learning stuff left and right here.
So the troops align with the crowd. They're now armed. Stanislas Maillard, which I gotta love a Polish first name and a French last name. That just speaks to my heart. Takes the mob to the palace in the rain whilst dragging a cannon. To give you a little bit of a geography lesson, the march from Paris to Versailles takes about 6 hours in the gall darn rain.
12 miles, people. We're not talking about
miles.
We're marching around the square.
And this is just regular women dragging a cannon that they have stolen. Fascinating.
That stout fishwoman. They can just.
And they're all starving. Like, that's what gets me, is that they're mad because he's throwing this feast, this opulent feast for his incoming troops, and not feeding his city. So they march while they're starving. The guardsmen want to follow the mob to protect the king, but Lafayette is worried about leaving Paris unprotected and about the optics of bringing the entire army to the king's doorstep. So they hesitate, but the men went out, and Lafayette leads 15,000 men behind 7,000 women to Versailles. Now, again, the women are armed, sort of, with things that they don't know how to shoot, things they've probably never seen up close and personal. So it's interesting that they have double the manpower to just deal with these fishwomen, but okay, whatever. And remember, there's already troops at Versailles, because that's the whole point of the argument, is that there's like 1,200 troops there getting fed this lavish feast while the entire city's starving. The women are super pissed. They're super wet. They start quoting Rousseau, shouting at the priests, and generally just fucking shit up. Robespierre and Moynier calm them down and promise a delegation to the king. They elect 6 women to appeal to the king. The first to speak faints. She's revived by smelling salts by order of the king, and this action softens the crowd. I'm pretty proud of Louis here. I gotta say, he was kind of a victim of the times as well, but his stupidity and not like reading the room is what ultimately caused his demise.
Right.
So he softens the crowd's view of him, revives this woman, and she starts talking to him while Lafayette's courier finally arrives to say, hey, we are following them, but like, oof, it's going to take us a minute. Okay. The king decides to ratify the August decrees and the Declaration of the Rights of Man, hoping to stem the tide of war. Now, I don't know if you're following. 7,000 women show up on the doorstep of Versailles, chanting things like, we want bread and down with the bread king. They are wet. They have a cannon. They are out for blood. 6 of them are allowed to talk to the actual king of France, which would never happen in any other historical context. Like, they would have just been killed at this point in time. But you can tell that the unrest is hitting the troops as well, because they're with them on this. They agree with the people. So at that moment, these women did something that all the men in parliament couldn't do. They convinced the king to ratify the August decrees, to say that men are actually worth something. And
how magnificent.
I know, right? But also, it's a huge win, but they're not done yet. So at midnight, the army finally makes it, and they are quoted to have been so great in numbers that even marching 6 abreast, they took an hour to pass. They're determined to rescue the king from his unpatriotic guards. They feel like the guards at Versailles are wrong for having let these women into the king's space at all. Lafayette appeals to the king to humbly ensure he was there to guard him. Others disagree. They shout, there goes another Cromwell. To this, Lafayette purportedly replies, Cromwell would not have come unarmed, which I think is the best in French wit ever. And this is a Lafayette who's already lived through the American Revolution. So he is not a dumbass. He knows what the fuck he's doing. So he shows up armed and then reassures the king that he's there to protect him. Whether we believe that or not isn't important. And all of his actions going forward aren't important. What's important here is the diplomatic genius that Lafayette is. Hats off. Absolutely beautiful. My three-quarter hat goes off to you, sir. So he greets the king by prostrating himself and dramatically proclaiming, "I have come to die at the feet of your majesty." Lafayette wants the king to retreat to Paris with his men for safety. He chooses not to at that current time. So on October 6th at 5:30 a.m., a group finally breaks through the barrier and sneaks onto the ground, killing the guardsmen and searching for the queen. Hausch rescues the family while the insurrectionists mount the guards' heads on pikes. They only killed 2 guards. I mean, like, only. That's pretty rough. Lafayette encourages and helps the royal family to confront the crowd. Lafayette personally convinces the king and queen with their children to get on a balcony and say something, I don't know, that's going to like appeal to them, right? So the crowd wildly applauds, chanting, "To Paris!" Louis, it seems, no longer had a choice in the matter. Resigning to his fate, he announced, "My friends, I shall go to Paris with my wife and children. It is to the love of my God and faithful subjects that I entrust the most precious to me." Fascinating moment. 60,000 people lead the king to France. So their numbers have gone from 7,000 fishwomen and 12,000 guards to 60,000 people. This is where I also didn't know the population of France. Like,
And this is like in a day, right? Like
yes, we're 3 days into this march. Yes. Yeah. 60,000 people lead the king to Paris, shouting, the baker's wife, and the baker's son to Paris," as Louis was known as the first baker of France, a nickname coined during the Flower Wars.
Yes, that's a real thing, people.
Listen, I got so involved in this research.
And
I was
like, to pick a flower from a garden. No, like
food.
baking flour.
I got so involved in this that I was like, we should take a moment to talk about the Flower Wars of 1482. And then I was like, shit, we can't do this. This has to be like listenable. Like, I want to get through this whole 2-hour podcast. So suspend the interest and Google it by yourself, but it is fascinating to learn about the Flower Wars. So this has been a long argument of the French people. They have been starving for 300 years at this point. They put the royal family in the Tuileries Palace, and they strip the king of his title, King of France and Navarre, and call him just King Louis XVI, King of the French. I also didn't know what Navarre was until I had to do this podcast prep. So if you want to learn a little bit about past European geography, it was a fascinating time. There was a whole separate country in between France and Spain, and they fought over it like every other year. Why was there such a scarcity of grain during King Louis's reign? So we did mention the Flower Wars of the 1400s. There has been a scarcity of grain throughout Europe for a very long time. The grain scarcity started in part due to the Little Ice Age and the eruption of Laki in Iceland, and an El Nino that caused harvest failures in 1788 and 89. Many believed that the monarchy was inflating the price of grains artificially, and they kind of were. After everything came out, it was found that the members of the monarchy and the parliament were dictating what was to be planted and how much of it. Then they were manipulating the market because they wanted a free market on grains so that they could make more money. Now, they convinced the king that a free market on grains would actually provide more grains to the people because people could grow as much as they wanted. But what ended up happening is that the people would grow it. They would give it to the farmer who owned the land, like they were just feudal peasants. The peasants would turn all their grains in. The prince of whoever owned that space would take the grains to another place to charge more for them so that they could make as much money as possible. At this time, a new style of economic governance, a free market. This was pushed by the physiocrats, which I had never heard that word before.
Me neither.
Doing this.
I mean, you can just add crats on the end of anything.
You really
make it a new word.
So their work didn't actually result in more grains. By late 1775, there are over 300 recorded raids on grain stores throughout Europe. There were exacerbating factors like the rise in population. So from 1720 to 1789, France went from 19 million people to 28 million people, which is a 40% increase. Now, the rest of the world only saw a 13% increase in population. So I don't know what the French were doing, but I know what they were doing. You know? And I can't help but bring this back to religion. I really think a lot of this has to do with them being Catholic. And like we said, like there's no out for them. They have to have babies. They have to keep.
I mean, shit, it's the end of the 18th century. What else is there to do?
Yes, this is so true. There is no TikTok. The refusal of part of most of the French to eat anything other than a cereal-based diet was another plaguing factor. So while the rest of the world was switching to things like potatoes, peas, and other legumes to fortify their diets, the French ate nothing but grains. Bread accounted for likely 60 to 80% of the budget of a wage earner's family in the Essene regime. So even small raise in grain prices could spark huge tensions. These challenges pushed the French towards the August Decrees, a series of documents persuading the French to dismantle the feudal system and the farming and land ownership and attribute inalienable rights to the people. So why are we talking about the Women's March on Versailles? The similarities from pre-Revolutionary War France are pretty staggering.
I mean, has any of this hit home, especially with you ladies?
A growing national debt that the French government couldn't sustain, as the king did not have the rights to tax the noblemen. So all of his taxes are coming from the lower classes, who again are all being taxed by the noblemen. So they're getting triple taxed at this point by the church, the noblemen, the king, etc. The noblemen also controlled the assembly. So any proposed tax bill were dead on arrival. They weren't going to pass anything that encumbered their ability to earn more money and tax their people harder. The wealth gap in pre-Revolutionary War France, of the top 20% owned 60% of all the money. Now the top 20% in America holds 70% of the nation's wealth. Now there's been some discrepancy on this fact, and honestly, this idea that the wage gap between the bottom half of us humans and the top half of us humans currently is bigger than the wage gap in pre-revolutionary France. And I found conflicting info that wasn't true, that was true. We can just look at the changes in the wealth gap currently, and we can answer our own questions and draw our own conclusions from that. Now, I did a lot of math. I made a really pretty table. And then my dumbass learned that I didn't have to do the math, that the government website that I looked this up on did the math for me. And I was super pissed, but I'm going to use the math right now.
Well, yeah, but you know what? You need to take comfort in the fact that you did the math. So all those times when we were like, God, we spent so much time learning all this stupid fucking math in school. But you know what? You can still do the math.
I know Brad Jager,
my
math teacher from high school, Brad Jager, will be absolutely astounded that I could turn these numbers into percents, but I did it, Mr. Jager. I fucking did it. So in 1989, the top 1% of the population owns $1.76 trillion. And the bottom 50% owns $0.72 trillion. Okay. The economic total in the US is $20.44 trillion as an economic total GDP, everything that we all own, right? That's 1989.
Is it like, does anyone else have a problem when you're dealing with like billions and trillions?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around what that even looks like.
There's a German word for that, and right now I can't recall it, but it came after World War I when they started printing all those Deutschmarks and they thought like printing more money would make it better, but then it caused inflation, and then they were paying 300 Deutschmarks for one piece of bread.
Right.
But I can't remember what that is, but it's being like amazed by zeros. Right. Just too many fucking zeros in $1 trillion.
I cannot compute.
Fascinated. So in 2025, the top 1% owns $23.33 trillion, and the bottom owns $4.21 trillion. Now, our total GDP is $167.27 trillion. So it may not seem like that big of a gap, but what I will tell you is it's fucking huge, okay? Because in 1989, the top 1% owns 8.6% of the GDP, while the bottom 50% own 3.5%. Currently, the top 1% own 13.95%, and the bottom 50% own 2.5%. So all of the money that the top makes comes from the bottom 50%, and then also the 50 to 90 percentile income. So all the poorest people suffer while all the richest people get rich. And the middle people, there's not much change. There's not much upward mobility in any way. But yes, I did all this goddamn math and then realized I could toggle. If you're wondering where I got all this information, it is the Fed table distribution of household wealth in the US since 1989. We will include all of these links in our show notes so you can do your own math. What does this lead us to? We need a fucking revolution, Karen.
Don't you know it's gonna be all right? Yeah, prepare friends. I'm going to sing. It won't be pretty, but part of my lovely spice variety of ADHD is that I relate everything to a song, a movie, a television quote. So it's gonna get real weird, guys.
I started just singing every song that's stuck in my head to my husband all the time. So anytime there's anything stuck in my head, he just gets the unfiltered, terrible version of it. And it can be anything from Taylor Swift to Huey Lewis to Megadeth. So he loves it.
So, yes, we need a revolution. And I have to say that we are recording this podcast on the heels of another No Kings march that happened yesterday. And I just have to say, even in our little corner of the US, so many people showed up. So many people know that the things that are going on right now are a bunch of bullshit. And they are willing to go out there, just like these poor, sturdy fishmonger wives in 1700s France, and say, no, the stuff that you're doing is not okay. And we're going to let you hear about it. So I guess now we turn into my part of the podcast, which is fun facts. Now, I think we should relabel this maybe interesting facts, because some of these facts are really not all that fun.
No, let's call them all fun and see how sad this gets.
So we already talked a little bit about, typical French laborers spent 70 to 90% of their wages by 1789 on bread. Earlier in the century, it was about half of their wages. So putting this in context, still spending half of my wages on bread, well, I might think that that is a worthwhile expense. My husband may not agree. But think about that. Think about your own budget. Are you spending even half of your budget on food for your family? Then try to imagine 70% of your budget is literally going just to feed your family. You're not doing anything else. You're not paying your mortgage. You're not paying your electric bill. It's literally just so you can stay alive.
As Keanu Reeves said in Good Fortune, I don't even get to do anything fun.
Obviously, this was significant because the whole march is led by women, right? So they get extra people coming in. They get the support even of the military, which is amazing. And this was kind of the first time that women were able to demonstrate their own political agency. So women, obviously, in all facets of life, were completely marginalized then, now, whatever. So this was a big deal. And one of the results of this was that eventually new laws came about that limited the power of men over families. It legalized divorce. Women finally had the right to conduct business on their own without permission from men. Also, there were some interesting things that came out of it that were not necessarily specifically related to just women. New laws decriminalized homosexuality. It removed the requirement for unmarried or widowed women to declare pregnancies under threat of death. But just like all good things, it didn't last. So even by 1793, there was more backlash. Women started to get excluded again from political life. They had social clubs that got shut down, and a lot of their new rights were taken away. If that wasn't bad enough, in comes Napoleon. Whole other set of stuff we could talk about there. But he literally made women legal minors again. So literally unable to make any of their own decisions about anything. So that's super cool.
I think it really just proves that anytime society takes a step forward and is moving, it's because of women. And anytime we get relegated again and
Fucking me.
yeah, we get put back in our cage. The whole society, the whole society. When you liberate women, when you educate women, when women are given the keys to their own success, all of society benefits. And then when men figure that out and start limiting women again, all of society takes a dip.
Suffers. You know what the super fun thing is? None of them would fucking be here if it wasn't for a woman.
I do love this current regime's interest in pro-life mess, but zero interest in life itself.
Right. Okay, so on to some different interesting facts. So one of the revolutionary leaders during this time, he was a journalist. His name was Jean-Paul Marat. He had a very severe skin condition, which at first I was like, dude, I can relate. So many skin issues, but really my stuff's not this bad. He literally spent the majority of his time in the bathtub. So the bathtub was his office. People would come into his house. They would have meetings while he was in the bathtub.
Why are you saying this like it's a bad thing? I'm here for this. I would have meetings once.
Saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying it's interesting.
It is fascinating. I would absolutely take meetings from the bathtub.
Now, one thing that I always talk about, like a lot of people are afraid of spiders. I'm not afraid of spiders as long as they don't come at me when I'm in the shower. When you're in the shower or the bath, you're very vulnerable. Well, the same proved true for Monsieur Marat. In 1793, a young lady by the name of Charlotte Corday was opposed to all of the things that he stood for, to all of this radicalism, to this revolution. She talked her way into his house, pretending she was delivering a crucial piece of information, and stabbed him while he was bathing. He was attacked while defenseless, ended up being portrayed as a martyr who died for his ideals. So the fact that this revolution was being led by women, and then a prominent figure of this revolution got murdered by a woman. I mean, there's women who don't necessarily get what the revolution's about.
Well, we always fight against our best interests, right?
Right.
Because the pick me girl has been a thing since 1780 beyond. It's hard. It's hard to not just have that self-preservation kick in and say, fuck all the other women. I want to be taken care of by a man and I want to be on the right side of this. So
right.
That's every Republican woman that we're seeing right now.
And generations of being brainwashed and not being able to have your own critical thinking. Yeah. So, okay. So I do find this a fun fact, not just interesting. One of the most important revolutionary decisions of this time took place. Can you guess where? Not in a bathtub. Well, I mean,
not in a bathtub. In a garden, because the French love their gardens.
Close.
Oh man.
Tennis court.
Yes.
Didn't even know tennis was a thing in the late 1700s.
You did, because you've seen Ever After.
Oh, that's true.
Bro.
Sorry. See, this is what happens.
Oh my God.
Okay. So yes, one of the most important revolutionary decisions took place on a tennis court. This was before the Women's March in June of 1789. People and their allies, called the Third Estate, were planning to meet, but when they showed up at the meeting hall, the doors were locked and guarded by royal troops who refused to let them in. So they gathered in one of the Versailles indoor tennis courts and vowed they would not leave until they had drafted a new French constitution. This act of defiance became known as the Tennis Court Oath, or the
That's so great.
Serment du Jeu de Paume.
Oh, that sounds so much better.
Right?
The French are beautiful.
They are. Anyway, so I thought that was pretty interesting.
That was great. And I did see that in my research, but I could not fit it into the scale of what we're talking about.
That's okay. It makes me feel like I'm contributing.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I'm so impressed.
And then a little bit more of a practical change. The revolution overhauled France's measuring systems. So one of the big things about the revolution was change for change's sake. So not necessarily the new thing is a better thing. It's just the new thing is better than an old thing. So one of the things that actually lasted that makes sense that America is not on board with is the metric system.
Oh, France did not have the metric system before that?
No.
What were they using? Just like whatever the heck they wanted?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yes, great. Love that.
I didn't know there was going to be follow-up questions. Yes, that's one of the changes that did last. There were other things that didn't last. They made a revolutionary calendar. It was very short-lived. And there was a lot of pushback, and Napoleon actually abandoned that in 1812.
I guess I can't follow up and say what was different about the revolutionary calendar to now.
Correct, because I actually did read about it, but I didn't write it down.
Therefore, so it did not exist in your brain.
Yes.
Yeah, fair.
It did resurface, but finally in 1840,
they gave up that dream.
Yeah, we're done with this.
I wonder, I'm interested to look it up because I am dying for a 28-day month every month and 13 months so that the year is equal. Like, I think that would just make fucking sense.
It would, but, you know, the times of Julius Caesar are too ingrained in our culture. There's no way we're getting rid of that kind of calendar.
But, like, why, though? That's where I'm stuck, is, like, what is the freaking point?
Well, my favorite thing, like, rabbit hole to go down sometimes, which, by favorite, I mean absolutely, like, mind-boggling and makes me kind of want to poke my eyes out, is that you start thinking about these things like, okay, so we can figure out who started these things, like our current calendar. But then you have to figure out, like, there was no social media. So somehow these things got spread all around the world. And everybody was just like, okay, cool, let's do it that way. And then even when they tried to change it, whether it made sense or not, they were like, yeah, no, it's not going to work out.
Why?
So yeah, that's a not great rabbit hole I get stuck in sometimes. Anyway, solution did not just stay in France. It fueled several other revolutions, including the Haitian Revolution. It inspired the Latin American Wars of Independence and also influenced political thinking in Europe for generations. And it also provided us with new concepts like secularism, nationalism, and the separation of church and state. Where do some of those things sound like they come from? Don't.
Chef's freaking kiss. I love it.
So those are just some fun facts for you guys to think about. So the French Revolution was not something that we obviously hear as much about here in America because, you know, it's America. We got to talk about ourselves before we talk about other people.
We also, like you said earlier, don't really know our own history. So asking us to learn someone else's history is bananas.
Right. And then really the only other thing that we discussed that I would talk about is that where do some of these topics fit into current culture, not just with politics. So the French Revolution is not like super duper prevalent in pop culture. There are a lot of things that have touched on it. I think a lot of us probably, even if we haven't seen it, I haven't seen it.
Are you going to say Hamilton right now?
No.
Okay.
I've seen Hamilton.
I wasn't sure.
So there are some depictions of the French Revolution or effects of the French Revolution in popular culture. One of the biggest ones is probably going to be Les Mis. So even though it's set later, the French Revolution is kind of the backdrop to Jean Valjean's story and the student uprisings and everything. Marie Antoinette, that's the movie.
Yeah, we see her a ton.
Sorry, guys. The movie from 2006 with
Kirsten Dunst. Yes, a stellar performance that launched her into adult movies. Yes. Not adult. Wait. Launched her into adult stardom. Wait, that's still wrong. Going forward.
If you are really trying to find something to kill 6 hours, there is a French epic that provides a comprehensive overview of the revolution from 1789 to 1793 called The French Revolution. So, speaking French may sound pretty, not always super creative with naming things.
Yeah. But, yeah, they just stick with the traditional.
Let's see.
I also love Eddie Izzard's take on the French, where he says English guys are always bad guys in movies because of the American Revolution, and French guys are always good guys. The sexy ones trying to seduce the whole family.
Now, one very lesser known movie that actually is something that I enjoyed because I actually watched it as part of my French degree is called Brotherhood of the Wolf. If anyone has seen Ocean's 12, the main character that is not George Clooney or Brad Pitt, I believe he's called the Night Fox, something along those lines.
Sure,
anyway,
I also haven't seen it.
That guy is the main guy in Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Oh, nice.
I've seen it in the original French called Les Pactes des Loups. There, believe it or not, is a comedy that involves the French Revolution. It's called History of the World Part 1 by one of our favorite directors,
Mel Brooks. There's also Start the Revolution Without Me with Gene Wilder, but it's probably not as funny as the Mel Brooks. So,
I mean, to be fair, even though I love Mel Brooks, I haven't seen either one of those movies. So maybe that'll be my homework, is I'll watch both and then I'll tell you which one's funnier.
I can watch the other one too. I haven't seen History of the World. Is that one?
History of the World Part 1. There is Part 2.
I have not seen that. I do need to watch that.
And then my last super interesting pop culture reference is, believe it or not, the march itself was referenced in the video game Assassin's Creed Unity.
That is fascinating.
So
I did not know that.
I don't know anything about video games because, well, except racing games, because my husband plays racing games sometimes. But yeah, that's pretty cool. So who thought that you could actually learn something from a video game?
I don't know. I think that's kind of the point of the podcast, right? Is that like art imitates life, life imitates art, and we can all intertwine, which is a beautiful way to sum everything up. To catch you all up on our projects, Karen drew hers out and then went ahead and painted it in with paint that she had watered down probably about 25%, and then has gone over her details with her straight paint. Oh, I just got paint in my hair. I switched colors at one point. You can barely see it here on some of my flowers, but I switched to Mako's Moody Blue. Caribbean blue is your true blue color, and then Moody Blue is really your French blue. It's that very deep cobalt blue. And so I used that at like a 75% reduction to add some details, and then I went in with it straight to add some really dark spots. Now, again, I did this just a la prima painting. I just went ahead and painted right on my piece. And so there's not really much construction here to this. I'm just putting flowers wherever I feel like it. And I'm going to continue working on this piece until she's completely covered. This is a Mako pillow vase. I own this mold. So we mold these in our studio in stoneware. So this one will be a high fire item where these blues may get a little bit runny and a little bit more organic than what Karen is painting on her earthenware piece. And we'll get into some of those particulars of the art that we create later and also in our project guide. So we'll talk about the difference between what cones we fire to and all that other great stuff. So what's our problem to solve? What are we going to do with all this information, Karen?
I mean, sadly, I think we're proving right now history repeats itself unless people
know it.
You gotta know.
You gotta learn the history.
Yes, which is something that us Americans are not always great at. And like, that's how you learn from your mistakes, right? So, the mistakes of the people that came after this march, where they didn't continue to push and fight and try to keep the rights and the gains that they made.
I think also the fascinating takeaway from this is moniker for success on a peaceful protest is that 3% of the population join in and then there's meaningful change. I did more math. Why not? But the 60,000 people that ended up marching on Versailles were 0.2% of France's total population at the time. And I'm not sure if they gained the changes that they wanted because the king was afraid, or because they represented a bigger movement, or maybe because we were less globalized then. So he only thought about the fact that, like, yes, he was a king to 19 million people, or 28 million people, but they weren't all in front of him every day. So to guess how many people that was, 60,000 probably looks like the same amount of people. Yeah. Like, if you're, I don't know. That's a really interesting idea. But I think also power in this was that the noblemen wanted this change too. So they were on the side of the people in this. They wanted life to progress and move forward. They didn't want to give up all of their power.
If you start population, there's no one left to collect taxes from.
I mean, that's a really in The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, right? Where she says, who wants a broken slave? The capital doesn't need a broken slave. So they bombed that one hospital because why not? It's a show of power.
Ugh. God, I remember reading those books and I was just like, I had gotten the first one for my nephew for his birthday, and he was probably, I don't know, 12 or 13. And he asked for it, by the way. I didn't just say, hey, you should read this.
Yeah.
He asked for it. And so I started, it was before they got super popular, no movies yet or anything. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And I read the series, and amazing series, so well written, absolute relevant topics that apply today. But I just remember going, dear God, this is a children's series or like a YA
series.
I am so depressed. I might go kill myself.
Yeah, it's rough. But if we look at the other things that we let young adults read,
oh, that's absolutely.
I think it's all the same. You know, Lord of the Flies and My Side of the Mountain even is really rough when you look at it objectively. But it is so well written. And it was one of the first book series that Adam and I, my husband and I, read together. So it sticks out in my mind as like a turning point in my adult life of like having a real relationship with someone who can read.
Oh, that's not like, I love my husband to pieces, but our ongoing joke is that he doesn't know how to read because I'm an avid reader. I always have been. And if it's not a car magazine, he's not interested. Oh. So what must it be like to have a partner that you can read these things together and have those conversations?
It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Not gonna lie.
I don't want me to be talking a lot of shit about my husband because he's amazing in a lot of
I know, we love Clay. We're Clay fans for life. I will say, though, I may have just lied to you. Our first book that we read together, so that's our first book series, was The Hunger Games. But our first book that I forced him to read was The Little Prince, which is an 82-page novella by our favorite saint, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
Exupéry.
Is that wrong? Okay, tell me.
Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
Really? Wait, say it.
Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
Exupéry. I love it. I've said it wrong my entire life. Just like I said Carrie Elwes's name wrong my entire life, and now
what is it? I say Carrie Elwes. Oh, what did you say?
Yules. People say Yules, but his name is Elwes.
Oh, I guess I must have heard it correctly because I've always said Elwes.
Yeah, I'm proud of you.
Love him.
Yeah. Ties back into our Mel Brooks fandom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything relates to everything.
Right. Yes, so I had to read The Little Prince in French in high school.
I also read it in French. I own it in French and in German and in English, in several copies of English, because I'm upset.
I guess so. Yes, Louise is going to be a one-upper.
I'm sorry. I'm just telling you how excited I am. And the only reason I own all the copies I do is because my senior year of high school, I took AP French, and we were done with class because we had taken our AP exams, which I passed. And the teacher was like, hey, I need help cleaning out my room, and if y'all are gonna like sit here and stare at me, you might as well help me. So we helped throw away a bunch of copies of The Little Prince, and I could not throw away all of them, so I stole them. So I'm not sorry, Miss Judge Cledway. They are in my closet, and I'm never giving them back. Do we want to talk about what our next week's topic is going to be?
Sure. What's our topic next week?
That's such a great question. I think next week's topic has to be His Majesty Aaron Burr, how a Revolutionary War player tried to start a kingdom in America. I think that's really well to No King's Day and also ties in really well to the French Revolution. So we're going to talk about Aaron Burr next week. At some point in time, we will be welcoming guests on our podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please email us, tag us, DM us, whatever. If you have something interesting to say about an upcoming topic, or you have a topic that you want us to cover, just let us know. The point of these podcasts is to show you that art and life tie in together, as well as the fact that like we could be doing better. So let's try.
Preach, sister.
Thank you for tuning in to Throwing Shade and Clay. Your hosts are Karen, manager of squirrels, and Louise, pod dealer extraordinaire. Produced by Louise. Researched by Karen and Louise. We are not professional historians, so don't cite us for your dissertation.